In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what you can do today to make your portraits pop. So let's break this video down into 3 sections. Section 1 being composition. So this is easily the most important part of the video, being composition. It's how you frame your photo. It's applying all these different techniques. Some of these techniques will work in some scenarios, and some of these techniques won't work in other scenarios. It all depends on the kind of photo you're taking. So let's talk about some of my favorite composition techniques and how I implement them into my photos. So something that I've been really getting into lately is reflections. Now you can get reflections out of mirrors, windows, or puddles, and I really like using them in puddles. Take a look at this image, for example. So in this image, you can see that there is technically a lot of dead space at the bottom of the image. However, if there wasn't this reflection here, the reflection of the lights from the car and the top of the model's head, if that had just been a road without any puddle, it would have just been an out of focus road, and that would have been really bad dead space. But because I've used this dead space with a puddle, it isn't really that much dead space anymore, considering there's this reflection going on, which is really emphasizing the lights from the car. It gives me a reason to be excited for the bad weather, because now that we've had this rain, it means I get to use puddles to my advantage. So it's a way to just flip a situation upside down and turn bad into good. The next technique that I love implementing into my portraits is not just depth of field, but it's making your 2D image a 3D image. So we all know that whenever you take a portrait, you want the background to be out of focus so that the whole emphasis can be on your subject. But I like to take that one step further, and instead of just having an out of focus background, I like to have an out of focus foreground as well. So take a look at this image here. So straight away, you can see that the emphasis right now is on the couple. The background is out of focus, but I've also got a foreground element of flowers. Now this will allow us to have 3 sections to the photo. You've got your foreground, you've got your subject, and then you can see the background. So instantly you're taking this 2D image, this flat 2D image, and you're giving it the illusion of full 3-dimensional space. Another example of this that I have is where this child is sitting on his father's knee. Now this one isn't so obvious, but I am shooting within a bush for this photo, and you can see to the left that there's these out of focus green kind of areas. That's because there were leaves right in front of the lens that are out of focus. Now again, that's adding the frontal element to this photo that's out of focus, but it's also helping frame the photo to the left. These 2 elements put together, it really helps direct the eye straight to the subject and where the photographer wants you to look at. Hello, Matthew from the future here, currently editing the video. I just wanted to jump in and quickly say that you're going to want to stick around to hear the last tip that I'm going to give, because it is scary how much of a difference that the last tip makes to your portraits. So seriously, you want to stick around for it, but I'll let you get back to the video. Now, on the topic of your eyes being directed to the subject, of course, we have to talk about leading lines. Now, I use this all the time, especially when it comes to bridges. I love to get my camera really close to the side of the bridge and shoot directly down there and have my subject in accordance with that. This then gives the effect of a seriously out of focus line that starts coming into focus right up until it reaches the subject. This is just directing the line like a train track right down to the center of where the subject is. I use this technique all the time here. You can see it in this image, and you can see it a bit more subtly with this image. Even though I'm not right up to the bridge this time, I'm still shooting with the 2 lines directing you in to the subject. So the next section to this video that I want to touch upon very quickly is settings. Now you might have been looking at those image examples and thinking, well, how did you get so much depth of field, or how did you make your image so sharp? Well, it's all down to using the correct settings. When it comes to portrait photography, the most important setting you can use is your aperture. This is what's going to give you that creamy depth of field that you want in a portrait. So when you're shooting a portrait of a singular person, you basically want your lens to be as wide open as possible. And that can be anywhere between f1.2 to f1.8. That's going to really focus on the eye, and then everything else is going to be bung out of focus. It's when you start closing down your aperture to f2.8 or 3.2, I'd be using that kind of aperture when I start implementing more people into the photo. If you're shooting 2 people in a single portrait at f1.8 or f1.4, chances are one of the people will be in focus and the other one will be out of focus. You don't really want that when you're shooting 2 people in a portrait. You want them both to be in focus. So make sure that when you're doing that, you're shooting anywhere above 2.8 and below 5.6. And naturally, you're going to want to use a shutter speed that's going to be fast enough to freeze the action. So if you've got a model who's just sitting there and standing there, you don't necessarily need the fastest shutter speed in the world. As long as it's above 1/100th of a second, you'll be pretty much fine. It's maybe when you're taking portraits of someone and they're running towards the camera that you might need a faster shutter speed of maybe 1/400th of a second or faster, just to make sure that you freeze the aperture. And your ISO, you just want to make sure that's set so that you've got a perfectly lit photo. So the last technique that I implement into every single portrait that I do is in Lightroom. So let's head over to the office and take a look at this little trick that I use to make my portraits pop. So here we are in Lightroom with a portrait I took during a First Holy Communion back last year. And like I said, I use this technique on every single portrait I take. That's how important this next step is. So what we're gonna be doing is taking a look at over here on the masking side of things. Now you can see I've already got a mask set up. It's just a gradient filter to exaggerate the warmth of how much light is coming through the window. Now, what you'll also see is I have another mask which is perfectly outlined on the subject. So if you were to take a look at a before and after for this shot, look how bland the image becomes when you take away those masks. So how do we do this? So if I delete this for now, what you're going to want to do this yourself is click on the blue plus here and then select subject. Now straight away, Lightroom will realize what your subject is and it will create the outline there. So now any adjustments we make to the image are actually going to be only adjusted on our subject. So this will allow us to now maybe up the brightness, you can up your contrast, you can fill about with all the different settings here. I usually like to bring up the exposure, up the shadows, up the whites, and slightly bring down the blacks to add a bit more contrast, and then maybe up that warmth just slightly. Now when we look at this before and after, look at the impact it has on maybe 10 seconds worth of editing. It is so worth implementing this little feature into your portraits. Bring up that brightness, bring up those shadows, bring out as much detail as you can from your raw file. And this is going to really make your portraits pop. When you implement all 3 of these techniques, going from your composition, your settings, to the masking section in Lightroom, all 3 of these things will absolutely transform your image. So while I'm here, I may as well just do the outro in Lightroom. So thank you so much for watching. If you got to the end, if you could leave a like on the video, it would really help out the channel. And subscribe if you found this useful, because there's going to be more tutorials and more reviews coming out in the future. So thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.